Wohin sonst?
Hello, folks, and welcome to a new episode of Data Talks with an old friend of mine, Thomas Kasemir. How are you, Thomas?
I'm fine, thank you. Hi, Ben. Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm actually a bit jealous about the background you have compared to me. Well, the background of your experience and the background of your wall. So, but actually, we travel quite a lot often together to the Bay Area. I think we have shared experience. The world may know it, working for Informatica, where we brought together some good data management solutions to market. Thomas also spent a very long time in IBM. So I think he's definitely a person I fully rely on and trust in developing state-of-the-art software solutions.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. And that's why I invited you. And I think it's time to look at a few topics with Thomas, because I think the market is rapidly changing, especially about how you're developing and bringing solutions to the market, and especially for customers. How are you using these solutions to solve your business problems? Whether it's in e-commerce, customer experience, supply chain, analytics, compliances, and so on. And I very often see in the market, and that brings me actually to the first question, Thomas, I have for you, is still some people, whether it's even IT leaders or business leaders, have not yet understood what is the difference. What is the difference between consuming software on-premise, hosted, or as a cloud-native offering? And I think all means probably completely different things for the user, for the customer of these. And with your deep R&D background, can you try that the people really understand how they're so fundamentally different?
I'll do my very best. So I think in general, it's important to consider different aspects that are relevant for all those different types of how you operate your solutions. One thing is, of course, usually customers are interested in the uptime of the solution. And this is influenced, of course, first of all, if there are any failures or problems during the operation, or also there's downtime for updates, patches, and that's not only for the solution, also for the database, for the operating system, security patches, and so on. So this is an important factor. The other thing is who is actually really taking care of the customer's data, right? So there's a lot of relevant mission critical data from the customer in the cloud or on premise or wherever. And there need to be backups. There need to be some maintenance on the data, cleanups. And of course, we also talk about things like disaster recovery. So what's happening in the worst case? What are the countermeasures and what are the security mechanisms to save your data? And then maintenance is not only on the database; it's also log files. It's configuration. It's a lot of things. Also reporting on uptime and cost reporting and so on that needs to be done. Then security is a huge topic. That's one thing is the access security. Who can how access the solution at all, and then of course on a more fine granular level, who has which access rights within the application, but then also if the solution allows, for example, customizings, who controls that those customizings that do not bring in any malicious code, so that there can't be any exploits. And then of course, last but not least, is the whole monitoring, analysis, and then of course acting on any alerts on the system. Also a thing that you usually do not have in mind, first of all, if you consider to purchase in your solution. And of course cost, the final factor. So it depends on whether if you own the hardware, if you run the hardware, if you have to renew the hardware, and then of course if you own the people. You have to attract the people with the right skills, you have to train them, you have to keep them happy so that they stay actually. So these are all aspects that maybe come not first of all on your mind if you think about a new application or solution you want to purchase. And on premise, the story is pretty straightforward. We all know this. On premise, the customer gets a box from the vendor Okay, today it's a download, but in former times it was a box. And then the customer can do whatever he wants. He can decide on the hardware, he can decide on whether he's doing it in his own data center or with a partner or whatever. He installs the software, he has the full responsibility for everything I just talked about. Data backups, updates, security, but he can also customize it like he wants. He can decide to run it on more low-cost hardware or to invest more, and he can get the people and just do everything like the customer wants to do it. Yeah? So there's a lot of freedom, a lot of control, lot of ownership in this model, but of course we are also heavily invested with hardware, with data center, with security, with the people and all the maintenance updates. And also things like monitoring, alerting, and so on, sounds like something you only have in the cloud. But if you have a mission critical application running on your own hardware, you still need it. Yeah, you want to know what's happening if something fails. And of course, you and your team is getting the alert calls at night, right? This is also, so you are all in with your team if you do it on premise.
Yeah. So that means you have to really take the full own responsibility for making it run.
Absolutely. You're getting, of course, support from the software vendor, for sure. Usually good support teams and so on. And there may be partners involved, but they all work on a certain contract base with you, right? Mm-hmm. If it's your data, it's your hardware. If you lose all the data, if you overwrite your database with an old backup, your data is lost, right? If you don't have any other measures in place for this. It's really your thing then. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. When we now move kind of on, right? I think we have seen these old times, but right then, let's say vendors who have not built their solutions from scratch in the cloud, they've started to move things to a hosted offering, and we have both done it together. So
we did.
What is the next step then, right? And what is the difference from then you're consuming let's say classic traditional on-premise solution through a hosting service? What does that mean for a company using it?
It's actually today a very common approach. Yeah? So even if you look a little bit deeper behind many offerings that are out there and placed as a cloud offering, if you really look behind the scenes, many of them today are still just the old software, which I don't mean in a bad way. It's still the same mature good software that was developed by many bright teams and people, but it's still the same software, just hosted on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or whatever. Yeah? Usually this is a single tenant hosting, which means that you install the software almost like you would do on premise on a dedicated instance per customer in a cloud environment. Yeah? And the changes are there are some goods and bads for this. Yeah? First of all, you as the customer, you're getting rid of most of the stuff I just talked about. Yeah, so you don't own the hardware, you don't install it, you don't operate it, you're not concerned with configuration updates and so on. So you can really focus on your core business. And you usually have a much lower TCO as you pay this per month or per year on a subscription base. And the software vendor or partner is handling all the operations for you. Yeah, that sounds first of all like a big plus, and I think it actually is. Yeah, because especially if you're starting a new installation, if you're getting some new applications in your setup, it makes things for you as a customer much easier. On the other hand, of course, you are losing control, right? Because you're not owning it anymore. You're still owning the data, of course, but you are much more dependent on the software vendor or partner, yeah, because they usually have some network architecture behind it. They have decided on some service levels how they actually operate the software, how they install it, how much they let you configure. Sometimes this is a little bit restricted, how much you can customize actually, how you can get data in and out, how you can connect the system to other systems on-premise or in the cloud. All those things might get a little bit more complicated or be restricted. Yeah, and I think in many cases for good reasons, because if you want to provide a certain service level in monitoring, alerting, and analyzing issues and reacting on any problems, then you have to have a certain framework and setup that is fixed for your team, for your operations team as a software vendor. So this is needed, but it's really thoughtful to understand what are the restrictions. Yeah. So if you know the software from on-premise, really ask, okay, what is changing in the hosted environment? Yeah. And then, of course, also besides all those aspects, then scalability, of course, also kicks in, because people usually expect with a cloud solution that it's just available, like electricity. You just use it, you just have it, and if you need more, it's just there. And these things might also be different because you're still looking at an application that's coming from the on-premise world and that was architected in many cases years ago, yeah, and for a different operation model, for the on-premise operation model that we talked about, where you have full access and full control on the system, on all configuration files and so on. And this is different in the cloud. So you might not have this access, and functionality, but also scalability might be impacted. So it's very important, if you have growth plans in your data, in your throughput, to have an honest discussion with the software vendor and also with the operation setup, with the network setup, with messaging and so on, how this can actually scale. Yeah? So if you know the software can scale in a certain way on premise, you can't assume that it can scale in the same manner in the cloud setup. Yeah, because you are not controlling.
If I can interrupt you, you mean, right, it probably cannot scale in the hosted deployment mode. So
absolutely, yeah. That's good point. Yeah, in the hosted setup.
And would you say that with your experience that taking an on-premise software and providing it through a hosting service, is that a natural fit? Or is that only pleasing the need of offering a business model, which is a subscription model, and a promise to the customer? Yes, we make it easier for you, right, to start working with us. You don't care, you pay a price a year, and it's all done. But is it natural to do that, or is it more an intermediate step?
Yeah. It is not natural because it was not developed for this operation model, right? So when those applications have been designed, there wasn't any thinking about a cloud operation. Yeah, so it's not natural. It can be, I think it can be a good or not so good fit, and that really depends on the type of application. Yeah, if you, for example, have a very straightforward tooling application that's doing some conversion or some explicit service for you, then that's easier to bring it also as hosted to the cloud. A very complex application with lots of interfaces, with lots of customizable functions and connections, that might then become more complicated. It also depends, of course, on the architecture.
Yeah. And Thomas, I think what we also will do is, and that's for you guys following these conversations, we may do also additional follow-up conversations and going a bit more deeper in some of these aspects. But if we now move from on-premise to hosting it to cloud-native offerings, if you can look at why does it for you make sense on the one hand side from a software developer perspective, but also from a customer perspective, why should new generation of platforms be natively born in the cloud, and what is the advantage for a customer using it?
Yeah, the advantage really is that cloud native software, usually kind of software that was built within the last 2, 3, maybe 4 years, yeah, usually following a microservice architecture, was designed having all the new advantages of a cloud infrastructure in mind. Yeah, so this addresses first of all the scalability. Yeah, but also the maintenance and further growth and life cycle of the software. Yeah? Because while the old monolithic style, yeah, is very good to get started easily with people and getting on board and develop on the software, as the software grows, you are losing control. And I can talk about this in more detail maybe later, but I think many of us have seen this already. Yeah. So and this is the kind of the magic thing about the microservice architecture, is that you kind of keep it into small services that are maintainable with autonomous teams, and that's how you can grow your organization, grow the solution, and also scale it in a much better way, not only by having multiple instances, but also having dedicated services for different operations in your applications, and maybe also for even different data types in your application. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that microservice architecture is the silver bullet. Of course, like every complex problem, it needs a really thought through solution. And this architecture with many services really divided in your environment also brings new challenges, yeah, on how to actually cut those services, how to manage transactions that go beyond and above many services, and of course just managing all the dependencies between your services, because if you have more smaller services, you have much more interaction between them. And that's so there are still enough issues and challenges to solve.
I think that was actually a good maybe closing remark, because I think it was a good conversation with you, Thomas, to look at on-premise versus hosted versus cloud native. And I definitely want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ben.
And there will be a follow-up, actually, we're doing on going a bit more deeper on some of these aspects. So thank you for today, and thank you for listening, folks.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, guys. Have a good day.